Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast.
Yeah.
It's really great to have you with us today.
Great to be here.
We are diving into a topic that I think is going to feel incredibly relevant to a lot of you listening, especially if you've ever found yourself, navigating the murky waters of loss and just thinking, wait a minute, why am I reacting this way? Am I doing this wrong?
It's a subject that sits right at that fascinating and often really confusing intersection of biology, psychology, and, well, the very messy, very human experience of loving someone and then having to figure out how to live without them.
Exactly. And to kick things off, I really want to talk about expectations versus reality, because we all have this script in our heads, don't we?
Oh, absolutely.
I call it the Hollywood grief montage. We've all seen it 1,000 times in movies, on TV shows.
The structure is almost always the same. It's practically a formula.
Right. The phone rings in the middle of the night, or, there's a knock at the door, the bad news is delivered.
And immediately.
Smash cut to black. Rain is falling against a window pane, and the protagonist just collapses in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably.
Total devastation.
It's instant, it's loud, and it's visibly, undeniably devastating.
And that is the cultural template we're all given. We're
Yeah.
sort of taught to expect that the reaction to death is immediate. We expect shock to look like, trembling hands and wide eyes, followed instantly by this flood of sorrow. We expect this linear timeline. The event happens, you fall apart, you process, and then eventually you heal.
But then there's a reality. And for a huge number of people, and maybe even for you listening right now, the reality is silence.
Numbness.
It's numbness. It's standing at the funeral and checking your watch because you're worried about the parking meter, and then feeling this wave of guilt that you're worried about the parking meter.
Or going back to work a week later and actually getting things done, being productive.
Yes. You're back at the office, you're answering emails, you're making coffee, you're laughing at a colleague's joke about the printer.
Yeah.
And then this internal monologue starts up, and it is just vicious. You start thinking, what is wrong with me? My dad just died, or my partner just died, and I'm fine. Am I a robot? Did I not love them enough?
And that internal questioning is incredibly common, and frankly, it adds a whole other layer of unnecessary suffering onto the loss.
Totally.
You're already grieving, even if you don't feel it yet, and now you're shaming yourself for not grieving correctly.
Which is why I'm so excited for this deep dive. Because the source material we're looking at today, a really profound article called The Quiet Arrival, Understanding Delayed Grief, it validates that experience completely.
It does. It says this lack of feeling isn't heartlessness. It isn't even denial in the way we usually think about that word.
No, it's something else.
It's a specific biological and psychological phenomenon known as delayed grief.
Delayed grief. And that is our mission today. We are going to unpack this article, which also connects with some practical resources from the funeral program site, to really understand why the brain sometimes hits the pause button on emotion. We're going to look at the hidden symptoms, because let me tell you, they are sneaky. And we are going to explain why feeling it later might actually be a sign of a healthy, protective mind.
And I think the core message here really is about permission. It's about giving you, the listener, permission to grieve on your own timeline.
Yes.
Not the timeline that Hollywood or your well-meaning neighbors might dictate.
So let's get into it. Section 1 of our outline, the illusion of normalcy. The article uses that phrase, and I just think it's perfect. The illusion of normalcy.
It's a very specific, very perplexing state. The funeral is over, the flowers have wilted, the casserole dishes have been returned.
Life is supposed to go back to normal.
And the person just goes back to life. They return to the office, they're managing the family finances, they're getting the kids to soccer practice.
And to the outside world, they look amazing.
They look like the absolute model of resilience.
Oh, and they get praised for it, right? She is holding up so well.
He's so strong.
I don't know how they do it.
We say those things with admiration, of course, but we're missing what's actually happening under the hood.
Okay, so what is happening?
The article makes a really crucial distinction here. This state isn't denial in that simplistic sense of, refusing to believe the person is dead.
Right. It's not like they think the person's coming back.
No, not at all. The person knows they're dead. Intellectually, they've accepted the fact. They aren't waiting for them to walk through the door in a literal sense.
So it's not a break with reality.
No, it's emotional regulation.
Okay, let's break that down. What's the real difference between denial and regulation in this context?
Well, denial is cognitive. It's a refusal to accept the facts. Regulation, or what the text calls functioning over feeling, is a prioritization mechanism.
A what?
A prioritization mechanism. I want you to think of the brain as a triage nurse in a very, very busy emergency room.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Chaos, alarms are ringing, it's a mess.
Exactly. When a death occurs, especially if it's a spouse or a parent, life doesn't stop. Often it gets way more complicated.
Oh, yeah.
There are estates to settle. There are funerals to plan, which are basically these huge logistical nightmares.
And maybe there are small children who still need to be fed and driven to school.
Right. So the brain assesses the whole situation. It looks at the patient, which is you, and it says, okay, we cannot afford to collapse right now. Survival takes precedence.
That is a powerful image. The triage nurse looking at all the wounds. You have this, like, severed artery, which is the grief, but you also have to keep the heart beating, which is the logistics of life.
Precisely. So the brain essentially puts the emotions in a waiting room.
You sit there.
It says, you sit there, we will deal with you later. Right now, we have to keep the lights on.
Wow.
So it acknowledges the death intellectually, that's the cognitive part, but it blocks the weight of it emotionally, the somatic part. It's a split. You know it happened, but you don't feel the impact of it happening.
That explains that weird disconnect the source mentions. The feeling that you know they're gone, but it feels like they're just away.
Yeah.
Like on a business trip or something.
Exactly. It feels like they're just in the other room, or it feels like they're on a long vacation. That sensation is the gap between the cognitive and the emotional. Your frontal cortex knows the truth. Your limbic system, the emotional center, it just hasn't been given the memo yet because the security clearance hasn't been granted.
But that sensation is so unsettling. Because if you really love them, wouldn't you feel the hole in the universe immediately? That's what we tell ourselves.
That is the fear.
Yeah.
The listener questions their love. Did I not care enough? Why am I not devastated?
Right.
But the expert reassurance in the text is so important here. This is a human, psychologically protective response. It has nothing to do with the depth of your love.
Okay.
It has everything to do with the capacity of your nervous system at that specific moment in time.
It's just preventing a system overload.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which leads us really nicely into the neuroscience of it all. The source talks about the nervous system's role in something called emotional containment.
I love when we get into the brain science because it makes it so much less personal. You know, it's not a character flaw. It's just physiology.
Right.
The article talks about the nervous system compartmentalizing the trauma.
Think about your house. You have a fuse box or a circuit breaker, right?
Yeah.
If lightning strikes the house, or if you try to run the microwave, the hairdryer, the AC, and the vacuum all at the exact same time, what happens?
The breaker trips. The power cuts out.
And why? Why does it do that?
To prevent a fire. To stop the wires from melting inside the walls.
Exactly. To save the structure.
Yeah.
The brain does the exact same thing. The death of a loved one is this massive surge of energy, traumatic energy.
A lightning strike.
It's a lightning strike. And if that full voltage hit your conscious mind all at once, while you're trying to sign death certificates and pick out a casket, it might literally be too much to handle. You might enter a state of complete collapse that prevents survival. So, the brain trips the breaker.
Snap! Lights out.
Lights out in the emotional wing of the house. The kitchen. Your survival instincts is still working.
Right.
The office, your logic and planning, that's still working. But the living room, where you sit and feel things, is dark.
And this is an automatic process, right? This isn't me deciding, I think I'll be numb today.
That is a crucial point. This is subconscious. It's autonomic.
Yeah.
You cannot will yourself into this state. And more importantly, you cannot will yourself out of it. Your basal ganglia, your limbic system, they are making that decision for you before you've even had your morning coffee. It is not a willpower decision.
That takes so much of the guilt out of it, or at least it should. It's not that you won't feel, it's that your body can't afford to let you feel yet.
Exactly.
But let's talk about shock, because the source really challenges our timeline of shock. I think most of us think shock is like a few hours, maybe a couple of days. You hear the bad news, you're in shock, then you cry. The end.
Correct. That's the standard narrative.
Yeah.
But the source material highlights a critical fact. Shock can persist for months. For months. And it doesn't always look like trembling and staring at a wall. Extended shock often manifests as this feeling of unreality.
Unreality. Okay, what does that look like in practice? What does that feel like?
It looks like dissociation, watching your life from a distance. The article describes it as going through the motions rather than inhabiting your life.
Oh.
You might be at a dinner party, and you can see yourself laughing, you can hear yourself talking, but you feel like you're floating somewhere up near the ceiling.
Like there's a glass wall between you and the world.
A glass wall. That's a perfect description.
I've heard people describe this. They say, I felt like I was in a movie, or I felt like a ghost in my own house.
That is the brain shielding you. It's damping down the sensory input so you can function. The source also mentions time distortion as a big part of this.
Oh, right. Like days moving super fast or super slow.
You might lose whole weeks.
Yeah.
Someone asks you what you did last Tuesday and you have no idea. Is it Tuesday? Is it November? You don't know. And here's a fascinating one from the text. Memories feeling vague or neutral.
This one really struck me. The idea that you try to think of the person who died and nothing.
Just blankness.
You can't really picture them, or if you do, it doesn't hurt. It just feels like data.
It feels like looking at a Wikipedia entry about them.
Yes.
That is the emotional containment at work.
Right.
The brain has filed those memories under too hot to handle, so when you try to access them, you only get the redacted version.
The redacted version, that's such a good way to put it. You get the facts, but the feeling, the emotion has been blacked out.
For now.
For now.
Just for now.
Now, does this happen to everyone? Or does the way the person died change how the brain reacts? The source breaks this down into two main scenarios: sudden death versus expected death.
Right.
Let's look at sudden death first. Accidents, heart attacks, the phone call you never, ever expected.
The rupture of routine. That is the key phrase here. Our brains are prediction machines. They are constantly running simulations of the next 5 minutes, the next hour.
Okay, I'll go home. The dog will bark. My partner will be cooking dinner. That kind of thing.
Exactly. You have thousands of neural pathways, think of them as highways, that we've built over years. When I walk in the door, I shout, hello, and he answers. When I pick up the phone at 5 p.m., she answers. When someone dies suddenly, the external reality changes in an instant. But the internal map, those highways are still there.
So the cars are still driving on the highway, even though the bridge is out.
Exactly. The neural pathway doesn't just dissolve instantly. So you reach for the phone to text them good news. You expect to hear their voice when you walk in. The delay in grief here happens because the mind is frantically trying to bridge the gap between expectation and this new impossible reality.
It's like a glitch in the matrix.
It's a glitch in the matrix. The brain is just saying, error, data does not match prediction. And it's so busy trying to compute the absence that it can't actually feel the sadness of it yet.
That makes total sense. You're in cognitive catch-up mode. But what about scenario B? This is the one that I think trips people up even more. Expected death, chronic illness. You've known for 6 months, maybe 2 years, that this is coming. You've done the anticipatory grief, so why, when they finally pass, do you feel nothing?
It's so counterintuitive, right? You'd think, okay, I am prepared. The dam can break now. I will cry now.
Yeah.
But this is where caregiver exhaustion comes into play.
Yeah.
If you've been the primary caregiver or even just a close observer of a long decline, you have been running on adrenaline and cortisol for months, maybe years.
The body keeps the score.
It really does. You've been in a state of high alert. Did they take their meds? Is that breathing normal? Do we need to call the doctor? You are constantly in battle mode.
Yeah.
Your emotional reserves are completely, utterly depleted.
The tank is empty.
Bone dry.
Yeah.
And there's another factor that the source points out, which is very taboo to discuss, but is so real.
What's that?
Relief.
Oh, that is a heavy word.
Relief.
It is. But when someone has been suffering and you have been suffering alongside them, watching them suffer, the moment of death can feel anticlimactic.
The immediate sensation isn't sorrow. It's the cessation of stress. The alarms have finally stopped ringing. The machines are off. The silence is finally there.
And that relief, I can imagine that brings a massive wave of guilt with it.
Enormous guilt. My mother just died, and I feel relaxed. It feels monstrous.
Yeah.
But biologically, it's just your nervous system realizing the threat is gone. The source calls this the safety factor.
The safety factor.
Grief, the deep, weeping, mourning kind of grief, is actually a very vulnerable, energy-expensive state. You can't fall apart if you're still in battle mode.
So you have to wait until the war is over, the troops are home, and the armor is off before you can actually cry about what you lost.
Exactly. Your nervous system needs to realize it is safe to crash. And that realization might not happen until the funeral is over, the relatives have all flown home, and the silence finally truly settles in. That's when the delayed grief sneaks in.
Which brings us to the social aspect of this. because while your brain is doing this very complex protective dance, the world around you is watching, and they have opinions.
Oh, do they ever? We have a massive cultural misunderstanding of what grief is supposed to look like. Society basically demands that grief be visible, loud, and immediate to be considered valid.
If you're not crying at the funeral, people whisper, did they not get along?
Is she in shock?
Hmm.
Or, and this is the one the source highlights, they give you the compliments that are actually poison pills.
You are holding up so well.
You're so strong.
I don't know how you do it.
Right.
Why are those dangerous? They sound nice. I mean, I feel like I've definitely said those things to people.
And we say them with the best intentions. They sound supportive, but they inadvertently reinforce the suppression.
How so?
When someone tells you, you're so strong, the subtext is often, functioning is the correct way to be. Breaking down is the wrong way to be.
So you feel like you have to keep performing strength to maintain that approval from everyone.
Correct. It tells the griever that their dissociation, which remember is a symptom of trauma, is actually a virtue. So they lean into it. They suppress even harder. I have to be the rock. I have to be the strong one.
And the result is they judge themselves even more harshly for any crack in that armor.
Precisely.
Let's talk about the rituals for a second. Funerals, memorials. The source mentions the funeral program site in this context, and I thought the angle was really interesting. Usually we think of the funeral as the place where you say goodbye and get closure. But if you're in delayed grief...
If you're in delayed grief, the funeral can feel like a play you're just watching. You're an observer at your own family member's service.
You feel hollow.
Totally hollow. The source notes that for many, the ritual just doesn't resonate emotionally at the time. You might be shaking hands, nodding at the eulogy, but feeling completely disconnected from it all.
So is the funeral a waste of time for those people? Is there no point?
Not at all. And this is where the insight about printed programs and keepsakes comes in. The source argues that these rituals serve a purpose regarding reality, not just emotion.
Reality, not emotion.
Yes. They plant a flag in time.
A flag in time, I like that.
Even if you're completely numb, the act of printing the program, seeing the name, the dates, the photo, it's all data. It names the loss. The funeral program site emphasizes that these materials aren't just for the hour of the service.
You're right.
They're physical evidence that this event actually happened.
Because if your brain is in that unreality mode, having a physical object, a program, a prayer card that says, no, this happened, is a kind of tether.
It's an anchor. And later, when the feeling finally comes back online, that anchor becomes absolutely crucial. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Okay, so we've established the numbness, the biological protection, the social pressure, but eventually, the dam breaks.
It has to.
Section 5, the arrival. How does it happen? Does the brain just send a calendar invite? Grief scheduled for Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Laughs. If only it were that predictable. No, the source describes two main ways this happens. The first is what it calls the quiet arrival.
Which sounds lovely, but I have a feeling it isn't.
It's subtle, but devastating. It's the ordinary moment. You're pouring an extra cup of coffee out of habit, and your hand freezes midair.
Oh, wow.
Or you hear a song in the grocery store. You see their favorite brand of cereal. Suddenly, that theoretical absence we talked about shifts into permanent absence. It's the gut punch realization that they aren't coming back.
It's the moment the brain finally updates the prediction model.
Yes. The glitch is resolved, and the result is just pain. Second way is the dramatic surge.
This sounds less quiet.
Much less quiet. This is being blindsided. You're 6 months out, you think you're over it, you're doing fine, and suddenly, panic, rage, intense, sobbing sorrow that comes out of absolutely nowhere.
And this is where people panic, right? They think, I was doing so well, now I'm back to square one, I'm regressing.
That is the most common misconception, and it's so damaging. The expert analysis here is crucial. This is not a setback. This is a sign of readiness.
Readiness? What do you mean?
Your system is finally safe enough to process the data. You aren't falling apart because you're weak. You are falling apart because you're finally strong enough to handle the fall.
That's a profound reframe. I really hope listeners hear that. If you are crashing 6 months later, it means your safety architecture did its job, and now it's time to do the emotional work.
Exactly. But here's the tricky part. Delayed grief doesn't always show up looking like sadness. It's a chameleon.
The chameleon symptoms. This list in the source scared me a little bit because it looks so much like modern life.
It mimics burnout. It mimics stress. And that's why it's so often misdiagnosed, even by ourselves.
So what are we talking about?
Physical fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. You're just bone tired all the time.
Brain fog. Forgetfulness, like, I just can't focus at work.
Right. And irritability. Unexplained anger.
Yeah.
You're snapping at your spouse because the dishwasher wasn't loaded right. That
Yeah.
anger is just grief looking for an exit.
Mm.
Or anxiety about other losses, what we call hypervigilance. You suddenly become terrified that your partner is going to die or your dog or that you'll lose your job. Your system is just primed for loss.
So you go to your doctor and you say, I'm tired, I'm snapping at people, I can't sleep. And the doctor, with the best intentions, says, you're stressed, take a vacation, change your diet.
Precisely. You treat the symptom, you take the vacation. But the vacation doesn't fix it because the root cause isn't work stress. The root cause is the fact that your father died 8 months ago and you haven't actually processed it yet.
That is dangerous. You could spend years chasing the wrong cure if you don't make that connection.
Which is why awareness of delayed grief is so important. You have to be able to connect the dots back to the loss.
So if we know it's coming, when does it usually hit? Is there a pattern? Which brings us to section 6, milestones and integration.
Milestones are the classic trigger mechanism. The source calls it the ambush of anniversaries.
The ambush. I like that. But why do anniversaries hit so hard if we've been fine all year long?
Because milestones highlight the permanence. The first Christmas without them, the first birthday, their birthday.
Right.
These dates force a comparison between then and now. They draw a very sharp line.
It's like a spotlight on the empty chair at the table.
Exactly. But the source also brings up a really fascinating point about identity shifts. It's not just the loss of the person, it's the loss of the role you had in relation to them.
Identity shifts. Explain that.
Well, if you were a caregiver for your mother for 5 years, that was a huge part of your identity. I am the one who takes care of mom.
It's your job.
It's your job. It's your purpose. When she dies, you're initially busy with the funeral and logistics. But 6 months later, you wake up and realize, I don't have a job anymore. The loss of role hits differently and often later than the loss of person.
You're grieving your own purpose.
Yes. Or realizing you are no longer a child if your last parent dies. That's a massive identity shift. Or you're no longer a wife or a husband. That realization takes time to metabolize. It doesn't just happen overnight.
And this is where the source circles back to the rituals and those materials from the funeral program site. We talked about how those programs serve as a flag in reality. How do they help 6 months down the line?
This is the concept of retrospective integration.
Yeah.
When you're at the funeral, you're in robot mode, right?
Right.
You might grab a stack of programs and just shove them in a drawer. You can't even look at them.
Is it too painful or just you're too numb?
Often too numb or just too overwhelming to process.
Yeah.
But 6 months later, when the grief finally arrives, those materials become accessible tools. You open the drawer, you pull one out, you read the tribute, you look at the photo.
And now you can actually feel what's written there. The words land differently.
Yes. The source suggests that reading the tributes then helps anchor the emotion that was missing during the service. It validates the sadness you're feeling now. It connects the current pain to the past event. It bridges the gap.
That's beautiful. It's like a message in a bottle you sent to your future self. Here is the proof of who they were for when you are ready to cry about it.
That is a lovely way to put it.
Yeah.
It turns the keepsake from just a piece of paper into a genuine tool for healing.
So, okay, we've covered the problem, the science, the symptoms. Now let's talk solutions. Section 7, coping and reframing. How do we stop feeling broken or weird for grieving late?
Well, the very first step is the core shift in narrative. We have to move from asking the question, what is wrong with me?
Which is where everyone starts.
Where everyone starts. And shift to the question, what did my mind need to survive?
That is the compassion piece right there.
It's vital. You have to view the delay as an adaptation, not an avoidance. Your brain protected you. Thank it for that.
Thanks, brain, for keeping me employed and fed while I was in shock. Now, I think I'm ready to take it from here.
Exactly. And then there are actionable steps. The source lists a few. Self-compassion is number 1. Just removing the timeline expectations, throw away the calendar. Your grief is not on a schedule.
What about more active things you can do?
Journaling. Specifically, writing letters to the deceased. This helps bridge that cognitive gap we talked about earlier. Tell them what's happened in the last 6 months. Tell them you miss them. It helps integrate their absence into your current reality.
And re-engaging with those memorial materials.
Deliberately. Don't just stumble upon them when you're cleaning out a closet. Sit down with the funeral program. Look at the photos. Play their favorite song. Allow the feelings to come up in a controlled, safe environment.
And finally, of course, support.
professional counseling. And I
Yeah.
really want to stress this. It is never too late to go to grief counseling. If you walk into a therapist's office 2 years after a death and say, I think I'm just starting to grieve, a good therapist will say, welcome. You are right on time.
You are right on time. I love that. That's so powerful.
It's true. And the source emphasizes that support groups can be incredibly validating here, too, just to hear other people say, yeah, I didn't cry for 6 months either.
It breaks the isolation.
It shatters the shame, and that is so much of the battle.
We have covered a lot of ground today, from the illusion of normalcy to the neuroscience of the circuit breaker to the quiet and sometimes not so quiet arrival of the reality.
It's a dense topic, but I think it's a hopeful one.
I agree. Let's maybe summarize the key insights for the listener who might be in the car right now, nodding along, maybe feeling seen for the first time.
I think there are 3 big things. 1, grief follows readiness, not calendars. Your timeline is unique to your biology and your circumstances.
Period. Or what?
2, normalcy after a death is very often a survival shield. It is not fake, it is functional. And 3, the arrival of grief later, even months or years later, is a sign of safety, not a sign of failure. It means you are finally safe enough to feel.
That is the takeaway. You are safe enough to feel.
It is.
You know, we always like to end with a thought to chew on, something a little provocative. And as I'm thinking about this idea of the brain waiting for safety, it makes me think about love.
How so?
Well, if grief is just love that has lost its home, love attempting to find a new place to land, perhaps delayed grief is just that love waiting for the foundation to be strong enough to hold it.
That is a really powerful image.
We think of the delay as a void, as an absence of feeling, but maybe it's construction time. The love is so heavy, so big, that you needed 6 months to build a landing pad strong enough to catch it without shattering.
That is beautifully put. And it forces us to ask a bigger question, doesn't it?
Which is?
How many symptoms in our lives, the anxiety, the fatigue, the irritability, are actually just unprocessed love waiting for its turn to land?
A question worth asking. Listen, if you are in the numbness right now, please be patient with yourself. And if you are in the storm right now, know that it means you are safe.
And be kind to yourself. The timeline doesn't matter. The love does.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye for now.